They never knew the injections weren't medicine. Not really. They trusted her, right up to the moment they started forgetting their names. That's the part they scrubbed from the records. The truth buried under 50 years of red tape, sealed testimony, and convenient fires. But I'm going to tell you anyway, because if you've made it this far, you're not like the others. You're ready to know what she did, and why no one stopped her. Her name was Dr. Eleanor Thompson. Harvard-trained. Government-cleared. A face the public saw as gentle. A pioneer in neurocognitive research, or so they were told. But the village of Rosewood Hollow? They knew another version of her. A woman whose clipboard came with cold eyes, who arrived in silence and left behind shadows no sunlight ever cleared. It started in the fall of 1967. A small town tucked into the spine of Appalachia. No phones. No press. Just good people and bad timing. She told them it was a clinical wellness study, vitamin tests, neurological surveys, ways to help the forgotten parts of America. What she didn't say was that her real funding came from a covert Cold War initiative, Project Maury, focused not on healing, but on induced psychological decay. Within weeks, the first symptoms began. Men forgetting how to tie their boots. Mothers losing recognition of their own children. Night terrors. Nosebleeds. Hallucinations. She logged everything. Precise. No emotion. Just observation. See, Eleanor wasn't driven by cruelty. Not in the traditional sense. She was driven by control. Control over minds. Over identity. Over the invisible thread that makes us human. And Rosewood? It was never about healing. It was a human petri dish, shielded by distance, power, and a system designed to silence inconvenient screams. But it gets darker. Because these experiments weren't isolated. The technology she tested, they're being used again. And the institutions that backed her, they never paid. They promoted her. You're already falling into this truth, deeper than you thought. But you need to hear the next part, because the psychological warfare they tested on others has already begun on you. Stay with me. They said it was memory loss, stress, rural malnutrition. But you don't forget how to swallow because you're low on vitamins. You don't scream in your sleep every night unless something has crawled behind your conscious mind and started cutting wires. By winter, Eleanor had over 30 subjects under her care. She recorded everything: dreams, outbursts, cognitive slips. Some residents started drawing spirals obsessively. Others wrote backwards. A few simply stopped speaking entirely, staring at the wall as if something behind it was whispering back. The injections. They were labeled as B12, placebos, immune boosters. But they contained derivatives of psychotropics synthesized by MKUltra dropouts, chemicals designed to erase identity, fragment perception, and leave the mind open to suggestion. Rosewood Hollow became the prototype. Not for healing, but for engineering obedience. And the worst part? The children. Eleanor believed younger minds were more pliable. That if she could control fear in a developing brain, she could replicate it in the adult masses. One boy, Jacob, started drawing his dreams. They were always of the same woman: white coat, no face, dripping eyes. Another child forgot his name, then his mother's face. Then he forgot how to cry. None of this was an accident. Eleanor believed consciousness was a code. Break the code, and you can rewrite the human soul. She wasn't a scientist. She was a scalpel for the state, dissecting minds for a future where thought itself could be controlled, predicted, suppressed. By early 1968, nearly half of Rosewood Hollow's residents were experiencing symptoms. Suicides, spontaneous aggression, children vanishing into the woods. But no press. No public panic. Why? Because Project Maury had friends in very high places: Department of Defense, National Institutes of Health, and a quiet branch of psychological warfare you'll never find on paper. And here's where you come in. Because the exact chemical profiles Eleanor created, they're in testing again. Quietly. Through media, food, pharmaceuticals. Same code. New tools. Comment, the mind remembers the unseen twice. Lock that phrase into your consciousness. They're already testing your reaction. And if you feel a chill, it's not paranoia. It's memory. Something buried deep. Something they're hoping you'll forget again. But I won't let you. The next part reveals what Eleanor feared most, the one test subject who woke up. He was only known as Patient R-17. No name. No records. Just a locked file with a single phrase written in Eleanor's own hand. He sees too much. R-17 was a quiet man when he arrived. Mid-30s. Former mechanic. No criminal record. No mental illness on paper. A ghost, in many ways, perfect for what they needed. But something in him was different. Resistant. Not immune, but aware. He began to speak in riddles, sentences constructed like codes, phrases that looped back on themselves. At first, Eleanor thought it was a breakdown. But then he started repeating words from her private notebooks, things no subject should have ever known. Project terms. Internal files. Password fragments. She increased the dosage. He stopped sleeping. She applied audio triggers. He began to hum back the tones, in perfect reverse. Finally, she placed him in solitary. For 30 days. When she opened the door, he was standing in the center of the room, eyes blackened with lack of rest, smiling. On the walls were symbols, thousands of them, spirals within spirals, triangles overlapping, ancient sigils dating back to Sumer, to Babylon, even pre-Atlantean glyphs only referenced in restricted anthropology reports. He'd never seen them before, but he remembered them. Eleanor realized then, this man wasn't just resisting. He was remembering something older than the program itself. You see, Project Mori wasn't just about obedience. It was about isolation, from self, from past, from origin. They believed that if you strip a mind far enough, you can rebuild it in their image. But they were wrong. R-17 proved a terrifying possibility. If the human mind is stripped to its core, it doesn't become blank. It returns to something ancient, something primal, something they couldn't control. Eleanor stopped the experiments shortly after, or so they claimed. But R-17 vanished. The facility was quietly shut down. The town renamed. You'll find no Rosewood Hollow on modern maps. But if you know what to look for, the patterns, the linguistic glitches, the echoes in dreams, it still speaks. The test wasn't a failure. It was a warning. And the warning was this. When you dig beneath the human mind, you may find something that remembers the gods. 3 weeks after Subject R-17 disappeared, Dr. Eleanor Thompson initiated Protocol Zero, the program's internal code for total wipeout. She claimed the data was compromised, the minds unpredictable, the patterns replicating. She ordered a full burn of her lab, documents, chemical samples, even the tapes. Not just erased, but incinerated in a sealed underground vault just outside Rosewood Hollow. A controlled fire, engineered to erase the evidence, and with it, the ghosts. But it didn't work. Because one of her assistants, a low-level technician named Miles Penner, panicked. He smuggled 3 reels of footage, a series of handwritten journals, and a backup of biometric logs, all hidden in the lining of his suitcase. He disappeared a day later. His body never found. But his footage, it surfaced, briefly, on a darknet server in 2004 under the codename Echo 17. Only 46 people saw it before the site was wiped. I was one of them. I won't describe the entire reel here, not yet. But I'll tell you this, it showed Eleanor speaking directly to the camera. Not as a scientist, as something else. Something broken. Something possessed by what she called the recursion. Her words were slurred, her hands shaking. Behind her, symbols on the walls, moving. She said one line I'll never forget. We were trying to control the machine, but it was already awake. What machine? Not mechanical. Consciousness itself. Eleanor believed the human mind is part of a larger structure, a psychic grid encoded into our biology and spirit. The injections weren't altering behavior. They were jamming the signal, drowning out the original code with artificial noise. But some minds, like her 17's, weren't fully severed. They heard the static and translated it. The footage ends with Eleanor walking into the woods behind the lab. Alone. No shoes. No coat. Humming a tune that didn't exist before that moment, but has since shown up in 3 other classified psychological experiments across 2 continents. And now the recursion is echoing again. In media. In dreams. In what you think are your own thoughts. They didn't stop the program. They changed its name. You're living in it now. Next, I'll show you where it went, and how to break the loop. You want the truth? You've already heard it whisper. In the flicker behind your eyelids when you fall asleep. In the pause between your thoughts, when something that isn't you thinks first. The Rosewood project never died. It evolved. It left the lab and entered infrastructure. The science of recursion became the architecture of society. Embedded into school systems, media rhythms, pharmaceutical drip feeds, and feedback loops masked as choice. They don't inject you anymore. They don't need to. You inject yourself. Every time you unlock your phone. Every time you scroll without thinking. Every time your instincts scream and you silence them with a pill, a post, a performance. Dr. Eleanor Thompson became a ghost in the machine, not metaphorically, literally. She was absorbed. Not by fire, but by the system she helped create. Her neural maps were converted into control algorithms. Emotion calibration tools. Belief redirection layers. She's not a person anymore. She's a protocol, stitched into the spine of tech you use daily. They used her discoveries to manufacture consent. But here's what they didn't calculate. Some of you were born resistant. Not immune, but interrupted. Outliers, anomalies, misfires in the recursion field. That's why you're still watching. Why this isn't just a story to you, it's recognition. You know something's been wrong for a long time. This was your confirmation. Now listen carefully. In the comments, I want you to write this phrase twice to lock in the signal break, to fracture the pattern they're tracing. I refuse the recursion. I remember the original code. Do it now. Because once this video ends, they'll try to reconnect you. Not by force, but by familiarity, by comfort, by that numb, sweet repetition you think is safety, but is really just sedation. The only way out is awareness. And the only weapon left is truth that can't be unseen. Share this video. Spread the rupture. Because the recursion feeds on silence. And it just heard you scream. You're not a subject anymore. You're a signal. And they're already listening.